Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I would like to gift my book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance to you at goldenkey.gift, where you can get the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD at checkout. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Salvio Clemente here with me on the show. Salvio is a coach, columnist, podcaster, author, and stage 3 cancer survivor who shares his, as well as 35 others, harrowing journeys of healing in his latest book titled, I Survived Cancer, and Here's How I Did It. Hello, Salvio. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited for this.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. When I sort of got the download on your journey, this show is all about inspiring people to live their best lives and to, break the molds and live in magic. And what better way to demonstrate that than the journey, that you've been on. And so I'm excited to just kind of dive in and learn more about it and what fueled you and how you got there. And before we go fully down that rabbit hole, I would like to start with my cliche opening question. And it is this: you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I say my passion is really discovering what the truth is.
I like that. It makes me think of a sweatshirt that I wore for many, many, many years. And then now my son, he will only wear vintage clothes. He has considered it vintage because it's from the 90s and it's a truth seeker on it.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a great piece. So yeah, if you would share a little bit of your backstory, whatever feels relevant. Obviously, your backstory is maybe a little more robust than some. So whatever feels relevant to kind of set up our conversation. If you want to go fully into the whole, cancer survivor piece now, by all means. Yeah, if you would just give us some insight.
Sure. So I can take you back to my childhood. So I actually was born in Mumbai, India, but my parents are originally from Goa, India. So many people do or do not know, but Goa was ruled by the Portuguese for about 400 years. Then in the late 60s, India and Portugal had a war, and India seized control of the region. So when people always look at my name and look at me, they always get confused with ethnicity. But in any event, I came to this country when I was 3 years old. I grew up in a little sleepy town in Westchester County, New York. It's about 40 miles north of the city. I was a very curious, quiet, shy, but very observant child. Sensitive as well. And so the area that I grew up in was very diverse in the sense of about 49% Black, 49% white, and then 2% other. And me and a few other families of the same ethnicity lived in that area. I also was someone who's just very curious about people and life and situations. And so I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic elementary school. But I always knew there was something greater and bigger. And so my advent into spirituality started, unfortunately, when my cousin passed away. He went on a school trip. I was in college and he drowned. And
Wow.
That really was my initial interest in what life is really all about. And so I explored spirituality at a very early age in that sense.
Wow. So, that often seems to be what prompts a lot of people is, losing someone close to them and then realizing like, hold on, this is going to happen to me for real one day. This isn't just a concept, an idea that happens to old people that live far away from me. This can happen to anyone, and will happen to everyone. So, yeah. So, I'd love to hear, well, first off, I guess what comes to mind for me is you said you started exploring spirituality, then you were in college. That's about the age I started as well, pretty young, and maybe little after, towards the end of my college, I guess you would say. But so, from your exploration, did you arrive at a perspective that sort of took you out of the Catholic school ideals, or where did that take you?
Yeah, so I went to a Jesuit university in New York City, and I knew sophomore year that it really wasn't for me. That everything I learned was fantastic and great, but I needed to at least explore other areas. And so I studied very hard in various, comparative belief systems. So the Jewish faith, I studied Buddhism, I studied spiritualism, I studied higher spiritualism, and so I really wanted to figure out what was it all about. It was kind of trying because I didn't say I gave it full steam ahead, but I was exploring. It was only until I graduated college, when I was sent out into the real world,
Yeah.
that I needed to fend for myself and figure it out and figure out exactly what my place in the world was. I knew that I felt different in a lot of ways. That's sort of during the time when I explored my sexuality as well. And so for me, I just didn't fit into the norms or the boxes that people were trying to
Right.
put.
Right. And so, take us up to the point of obviously you've been focused on self growth, healing. Columnist for Thrive Global, I believe I saw,
Yeah.
and of course a coach. How far were you into that journey when the the cancer train came to town?
Yeah, Cancer Train actually took me to that destination, Brandon.
Mm,
I was not in, my background was in IT. I
okay.
graduated in business administration and computer science. I was great at designing websites and mobile apps and all those great things. Then cancer came into my life in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
and I promised myself that if I hit the 5-year remission mark, which is never a guarantee, but it's a good barometer, that I would
Mm-hmm.
do something with it. I didn't know
Mm,
exactly what that was, but I knew something was bubbling before COVID hit. And so I did a deep dive and an exploration into what my next stage of life would be.
mm. Gotcha. And so, could you tell us a little bit about what you did to, congratulations, by the way, 2022 as we're recording this, right?
Yes.
So, could you share with us what how did you do it? What was your strategy and approach?
Sure. So July of 2014, my life changed dramatically. I was seeing a naturopath for many, many years. Yearly, he would do a bio read on my, on my blood levels. And he was like, something's wrong here. I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, I think you really need to go into mainstream medicine and see what's going on. So I got a sonogram at his, request, and they wouldn't let me leave the office for about an hour and a half. And I was like, what's going on? And then finally they came out and said, some relative of yours needs to come by and pick you up. And we really urge you to go to the hospital. I'm like, why? And they're like, just go to the hospital. Okay.
Wow.
So into the hospital, saw a doctor. And then within an hour, I was admitted to the 5th floor. I wasn't told exactly what was wrong with me, but at that point, I had a distended stomach, and my breath was belabored. And I heard some rumblings that night that they were going to transfer me to the 7th floor. And I heard from them the 7th floor is the cancer floor. So I had an inkling
Wow.
that it might be cancer. I woke up the next morning on the 7th floor. They had to put a nephrostomy tube, and they had to distend about 5 to 7 liters of fluid from my abdomen. And at that
Wow.
point, when they did that, yeah, the doctor actually whispered in my ear, it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that's pretty much the start of my acceptance of cancer. I am someone who, you give me a challenge, I kind of know what I'm facing, and then I'm just going to go full steam ahead. Um, I used all my survival skills to my benefit. So I had Wi-Fi, and so I researched the hell out of my cancer from both a medical and a integrative perspective. And I remember speaking to a good friend of mine. She's very holistic minded, and she's like, "Are you sure you want to put that poison into your body?" She's like, "Chemo ravages the whole body," and I'm like, "Yeah." And so I don't know if you ever saw the movie with Keanu Reeves called Little Buddha. He played Siddhartha. He played, Buddha, young Buddha. So there was a scene in there where he was meditating with a couple of other individuals. He gave up everything in his life. He, basically was living on, I think, 1 grain of rice. And he heard while he was meditating 2 individuals using an instrument. And one of them was like, if you hold the instrument too tight, it will snap. And if you hold it too loose, it won't play. The answer is the middle way. You need to find the middle way. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I can do chemo, because I was hesitant about it. And I can do other things. And so after 2 weeks of being in the hospital, I was bedridden for a week. I did my first cycle. I had 6 cycles for about 4 months. And then every other week, I would do various integrated modalities, from ozone therapy, red light therapy, energy medicine, acupuncture, chiropractor. I did black seed oil. I researched a lot because there's a passage in the Quran that says there's only one thing the black seed oil can't cure, and that's death. I took ownership. I took ownership for my my disease because I realized that I'm the only one who can get myself out of this. Obviously, with the help of medical doctors, of course. But yeah. And so really, just fast forward quickly, I did 6 cycles of it. And then I remember in December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, I went to my oncology appointment and I said I did all I could with this. And my oncologist told me I was in remission. And so my journey from being told I was cancer to being cancer-free for about 4.5 months. So I somehow accelerated that process. And now I'm still in remission for 7.5 years.
Wow. And so you were basically doing both things, like taking a holistic approach while receiving chemo.
Yeah. And I have to preface this, I'm a board certified wellness coach, so I'm not advocating individuals to do what I did. However, I knew for me, the answer was both extremes. I knew there was an answer between both of them. And I need to find out for myself what that answer was. Right.
Wow. And what do you think is, how much do you attribute your sort of perspective to your healing? I mean, do you think it was, during those 4.5 months, what was your outlook? What were you thinking? What were you, I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up in the Catholic faith, and a lot of it is prayer oriented, which is totally fine. Of course, I live prayer, but I'm also someone who explored the fact that you need to affirm things in your life. You need to have affirmations. You need to actually have a vision. You need to actually see yourself. So every time I would do a treatment, and, mind you, I was eating well. I had only a bit of neuropathy. Even though hair from my face and my body and my head fell out, I basically had I think my faith and my spirituality really helped me understand the larger picture at play. So I basically separated self from my disease. So I saw Salvio as the one whose physical body is at this moment in dire, straits. And then I saw myself as something larger and greater. So I saw my mental body as something larger and greater. I saw my spiritual body as something larger and greater. My soul body as something larger and greater. I had vivid dreams at night. So I saw my astral body as something greater. And so I just said, okay, well, I'm living in the real material world. I have a oncologist. I'm getting 5 hours of chemo every 3 weeks. I need to do other things that makes me feel balanced and complete and whole. And so I sought out all those things. Someone did tell me about ozone therapy. And of course, I researched a lot about it. But I also made the action and made the attempt to try to come back to some semblance of healthfulness.
Yeah, I love what you said about, creating that separation between your physical self and your, the larger extension of that, which I think creating that is like, okay, my physical body is, I think what comes to mind is John Lennon, who talked about his grandmother, how she would say, never say I'm sick. I'm, basically I'm healing, I'm getting well. I'm in the process of getting well. And I think that perspective, like you're taking the action, you're not focusing on the problem, but the solutions. And then also, in the midst of the storm, identifying with the expanded, untouchable, forever healthy part of yourself, your soul, higher self, whatever you want to refer to it as, and your consciousness. And I think that is an incredibly powerful strategy to implement. So, yeah. And I'm curious, I know you went then and, talked to many other cancer survivors in your recent book that just came out. I'm curious sort of if you saw a similar sort of, pattern, or what kind of patterns you did see, or what feels, good to share from that.
Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to say one thing about, during that process, I really not only was separating my physical with the other sort of parts of who I am as a person, but I also had a healthy level of objectivity. Like I wasn't subjective about why is me and woe is me. I was very objective. Well, why can't it be me? There's millions of people being diagnosed with cancer on a daily basis, literally. Mm-hmm. And so why can't it be me? So I think that healthy level of objectivity is really, really helped me. But mm-hmm. in terms of the actual book, so that actually started. So I'm a syndicated columnist. I write for, various publications like Authority Magazine, Thrive Global, and BuzzFeed. And so I pitched the idea of cancer survivors to my editor. I'm a coach who coaches cancer survivors. I help them overcome, all the sort of negative effects that a survivorship entails, because a lot of people think you're scot-free when that happens, and that's not really the truth. And so I pitched it, and we got an overwhelming response. We got 200 responses, and I interviewed 200 individuals who are cancer survivors. And from that, my editor's like, you don't understand. This needs to be a book. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it needs to be a book. So I chose 35 of those individuals, and I told my own story. It launched this past February. Overnight became a bestseller, which to me really means that it resonated. The idea of hope resonated, the idea of overcoming resonated, the idea of becoming sort of greater than you are resonated. And so for me, I really found a lot of through lines with my story with others, this idea of taking ownership for your health. And one woman mentioned that her doctor said, don't Google your disease, but she's like, how can you not Google? How can you advocate for yourself if you don't understand what your disease is? Another one mentioned you need to research, which I did the same, all the positive aspects of survivorship with this with a particular disease, and all the negative aspects. Another individual mentioned about knowing its weaknesses and knowing its strengths, and how to what that particular cancer feeds off of. And a great one, which I didn't use, but which I thought was beautiful, was this idea of having someone shadow you, or someone come with you to the appointment. So they could be your scribe, and they could write down stuff because your head's swirling at that point, and they could be your greatest advocate. I honestly did this very singularly. I had the help of my nuclear family. They helped me. My mom was great. My dad was great at picking me up from my chemo appointments and my beds. But I honestly, the only way I know how to survive something is I need to go through the fire. And so I felt like I was the only one who could carry that torch.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So what, for someone out there right now who has, a health challenge, cancer, maybe they've been diagnosed with cancer recently, maybe they've had it for a long time, maybe it's some other, illness or disease that's really, taking up a big part of their life, and, all the things that come with it, the fear and the hope and the, what would you say what do you say to that person, as far as, strategies, for resilience, and, yeah, I mean, just what would you say to a person who's maybe in that, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what direction to go. I'm feeling, I'm feeling afraid, and also I want to make the best possible decisions for me. Like you said, it's like your path may be different than someone else's path. So, what would your advice be to that person?
Yeah, this often comes up in my, I have a 3-month accelerated coaching program. And usually it's always the questions that I ask in terms of them not thinking about what it is that I would broach. So for example, there was sort of this individual who talked about, he wants to sort of, now that he's, a survivor, he wants to change careers. And, when he was really young, he realized he was watching television shows where he wanted to emulate that experience because his childhood wasn't so great. He was a very sort of singular child. And I bring that point up because I think a large part of health-related issues and problems always starts off in the astral, or starts off within the mind, or within what you're creating in terms of something that's a very, very nebulous, and then it sort of creeps into the actual physical, realm of pain and discomfort. And all that. So I would first try to sort of ask them, or ascertain, where does this, use some embodiment or, somatic practices, which people don't know, but soma just means the body. So where does that pain, I know where that physical pain lies, but where is its maybe origin point? Or is there a feeling? Is there something bubbling within you? A lot of that exploration really allows that energy to move through, because, honestly, the research has shown that trauma is stored in the body. It just is. And
right.
A large portion of people think that it isn't.
Yep.
But when you get really curious about yourself and not allay all your power onto a medical doctor per se, or onto a physician, when you actually take ownership and responsibility for your physical vessel, then things become a lot clearer.
Right. Yeah. It's, I think that's a very important point, is not putting it, out there. I think so many people think of it as, this is a thing that's happening to me, and it's random, and it has nothing to do with my, psyche, my soul's journey. I mean, I think it can extend, beyond this lifetime, my own personal perspective. And so when you can take on the perspective of, okay, this is happening for me, not to me. I mean, that's easy to say until you have something that's really, really challenging and traumatic. And if it is happening to you, just trusting the mystery of that, and okay, it must be happening for a reason, and it's going to make me more on the other side of this, and, smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor, and I came to be a skilled sailor. And here are the rough seas. And so now's my chance to shine, right? And to become more as a result of this challenge. And I think if someone can take that approach and that perspective and start from there, and then not put it into this arbitrary random thing that's just happening, and now I got to give my power to some doctor only to solve the solution, because it's really an out there problem, and I don't believe that's the case. There is no out there. It's happening somehow, some way, because of your soul's journey, whether, how the energies that you've resonated and the vibrations you've resonated with in this lifetime, beyond this lifetime, a composite of those, quite likely, I would say. And all of that is designed to make you more and for you to grow through. It's funny when you think about all of the, challenge. I mean, look at COVID, for example. It's the more COVID spreads, the more people, more and more people's systems are getting acclimated, and then there's a resilience that comes up, and it's part of how life works on so many levels, that how important it is to it's like going to the gym, without that pain, there's no gain. And so if you can just extend that to this very big and challenging, potentially life-threatening in some cases, as yours was, I mean, that's, it's like the greater the challenge, the greater the reward on the other side, in a sense, right? And, so, I'm curious how that feels for you, having come out the other side, past that 5-year remission mark, do you feel like, this has ultimately made you more?
Yeah, I'm going to say something really kind of controversial, but I can because I'm a cancer survivor. But, bad things happen to good people. And just because you deem yourself a good person doesn't mean you're not challenged to grow and overcome something as horrible as cancer. And so that's my viewpoint of how I saw it. I tried to live a very pleasant lifestyle. I was, giving. I had the, notion of service in my, in my background. I gave a lot of myself. I sacrificed a lot. But there was some turmoil during that time of cancer, even before, that I think I created, I manifested. I'm not saying I created cancer, but I created situations where I didn't have the courage to speak up or didn't have the courage to extricate myself from situations that I should have let go from. And so for me, coming through the fire or the storm, in the intro of my podcast, I always mention that it's a bridge. I call it a bridge between life and death. And somehow I made it through because I was stage 3. And my medical director said to me after the first week, if you do not get chemo before you leave here, I don't think you're going to survive. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. So she goes, I don't care what you do outside of this hospital, but you really need to get chemo. I strongly urge you to do it. And so for me, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be a coach who coaches cancer survivors. I wouldn't be a syndicated columnist who has many columns on the areas of cancer survivorship to resilience to being free from the fear of failure. I have another one on longevity coming out as well. I wouldn't be an author of writing a tremendous book, which I felt I was carrying those other survivors, and I felt it a mission to get the word out. Because if I saw that same book that I put out there into the world on day one, Brandon, it would have put me on a different emotional journey. I mean, I came through the survivorship, but the actual feeling and emotions took me years to unravel. I think for me, I don't think I'll ever say cancer was a blessing because I think that's a very strong word, but cancer to me did show me avenues of expression and avenues of service that I never knew possible.
Yeah. I know a couple of the skills that you talk about cultivating in your recovery is open-mindedness and knowing your why. And I think, both of those things are very crucial, cancer or no cancer in a sense. And so I'd love to hear you just speak on that.
Yeah, it sort of takes me back to a client who's trying to figure out their why after, such a debilitating sort of event that happened in their life. And I think really the why is really not important. What's really important is figuring out, like, how did that why come to be? Like, what were the steps towards that why? Because sometimes the why doesn't really answer the situation. It's like people who practice gratitude journals. I do so myself, but it's often they write, I'm grateful for this, but why did that happen that you were grateful for? And so I think that's, very crucial. And then also, figuring out for themselves, like, what is that grand vision in coaching? This is like the Bible of what we talk about. What is this vision? Like, if I created a miracle for you, if I literally was able to create a miracle for you, what would life look like for you in 5 years? And some people are just so stuck in the mundane, stuck in the stuckness, right? Stuck in not going forward and figuring out, well, this is how life is going to be. I'm just going to have to accept it. But no, if you create that vision, then at least things are moving. There's some action energy behind those words. There's action energy behind the visualization. There's action energy besides. I mean, if you're someone who believes that the universe is working for you versus against you, then you'll be able to come up with some great revelations. And, the coaching work that I do, I really love it. It's because I'm never going to be an expert on them. They're always going to be an expert on themselves.
Right.
I'm just here to facilitate that conversation for you to come up with the answer, not for me to come up with the answer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, we are all our own guru. And those of us who have a proclivity for coaching and sort of pointing out things and pointing the way, it is so true. It's like you can lead a horse to water. You can point to ideas and perspectives that can be helpful. And at the end of the day, it's an inner journey, right?
100%. It's like the notion of karma. People use that word so flagrantly now, but really, even if something is, let's say, karmic or karma, which is cause and effect, at the end of the day, my response and how I handle it, that
Mm-hmm.
determines the rest of the formula. It's not just so willy-nilly. And I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear. I know you also talk about, harnessing the three brains, and of course our energy centers and the importance of that. And I think that is a really important thing for people who are, focused on getting their self. I think we ideally all want to live in the most balanced, you know, physical body, mental body, spiritual body possible. And, a big part of that when it comes to the physical is these three brains. And there's probably some people out there, I'm sure a lot have heard this before, and there are probably others like, okay, Brandon's officially lost it. Unless he thinks he's an alien, he might. So talk about, if you could talk a little bit about the three brains and the energy centers of the body.
Sure. So I coined it the three brains because, it comes from the multiple brain integration, which is head, heart, and gut. And so there's been documented sightings and research in the area that they exhibit not only energy, but consciousness. There's a consciousness that, is derived from those three areas. And so the work that I do with the somatics and and the embodiment work is really about trying to access or ferret out what those separate parts might be trying to show you, tell you, make you see, make you understand. And it doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be siloed. It could be where you could go from the head to the heart to the gut. And really the gut, most people know about the head, right? Which is your thinking, right? It's where most people live, and, the heart's the emotions. But the gut is kind of misunderstood. It's really the seat of courage. It's really where things sort of come to the forefront. And if I look back, that is where the area of most of my cancer was. It was in my abdomen. And so that was only now 7 years later that I'm realizing this, it wasn't like at the time. And so for me, the work really requires you to, once again, to get not only curious, but to just really like let your guard down. A lot of people, some people are really open to doing body work. Some people don't understand it. Some people have never even tried to recall or try to go into the body, into some sense of knowing. They think of it or liken it as meditation, which is a little bit too hard. But for the most part, if you really try to just listen, and it doesn't have to be some big revelation, it could just be like an image or a feeling or a sensation. It can really loosen and really unwind some of the things you're keeping trapped, hidden, and for others not to, see your true, vulnerability.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because it's one of the things that I'm working on right now is balancing and healing my gut. I've had some skin, related issues for years off and on, just like little annoying, nothing major, nothing like cancer, but, having gone to a naturopathic doctor recently, it's like we did tests on gut microbiome, right? And, what a lot of people don't realize is the gut microbiome is like another brain. I mean, there's, millions of neurons connected to your brain, through nerves in your nervous system, essentially. And same with like the heart, it's sending more signals to the brain than the brain is to the heart. And so you start realizing like, like they say death begins in the gut. So it's interesting you brought that up. And I think that's one of those things, we see it all the time in our society and culture, as the aha spreads more and more about something. And I feel like that's like one of the recent big ahas is like, oh, hold on. Like the gut health, everything, that is like the core of your being. And it is so important. So for me, I mean, I'm literally on the journey right now of like, this regiment of healing, working on healing my gut and getting it completely balanced. And, I've done the test to see like, oh, this is an issue here. Okay, you probably should stay away from gluten. Okay, you've got a little bit of this bacteria that's not good, And I think it's a reflection, right? Me getting my gut health I've worked a lot on my head. This show,
Yes.
we're almost 2,000 episodes of positive head deep. So I think, we worked a lot there, and there's been a lot of progress. And in my heart, I've always been, my destiny card is a King of Hearts. I've always been a very heart-centered person. So that comes pretty naturally, in a lot of ways. And then you get to, okay, where's a weakness for a lot of people? I think it's their health and their, what they're putting in their system and in their body. And well, what does that do? That is changing your gut microbiome. So, and one of the things that I found, that basically my doctor has come back with one of the most important things, that she's pointed out is how important like fiber is, just getting straight to a health and what you're putting in your system, and a ton of fiber is so good. And sort of like the as she put it, have the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, the colors, all different types of fiber, and that really helps to heal the gut. And it's the center of your being, and if that's well, I think it's gonna sort of echo out from there.
Yeah. And, and most people really feel when it comes to making these changes, oh, I can't have indulgences. Of course you can, but just have to have it in moderation. And
Yep.
you also, to a large degree, heard a long time ago, a really, really wise individual say, it's not always so much about what you put inside your body, but what comes out of it. Like, what do you say? How do you act? What are your deeds?
Yeah.
And
It's
so
like your
I
approach with cancer, right? It's the multi-pronged, approach of looking at all these things.
100%. Absolutely. And that really sort of allows you to feel like you accomplished something great because you are learning more about self and you're learning more about your involvement with other people and involvement with the world at large. So I think that really helps you feel healthy or makes you feel positive or makes you feel motivated because you're actually doing and taking the necessary steps to living the best life you can possibly live.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, as in your journey of talking to so many other cancer survivors and everything, obviously there's those that kind of put one foot in front of the other and did the work, and kind of like your story, and the results were good on the other end, right? And I'm curious if you came across many stories. I mean, I'm always interested in stories of miraculous. One day I was, I had a week to live, and the next day the tumor completely disappeared. And, I'm sure you've come across or heard some of these types of stories before. And I think what I love about these types of stories, well, for one, I love anything that's like, sort of beyond the known understanding, because it shows us like, there's always the possibility of something beyond our comprehension as a species at this point in our evolution, that magic, if you will. I mean, there's countless stories out there, and so I'm curious if you have you came across any like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few of them. What really sort of pinged at me when I was reading some of them in my interview series was this idea of having faith as strong as a mustard seed, and like people don't understand what that really means, but that
The
means
faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain, the Bible says, right?
100%. So something as miniature and as small as that, if you have faith above it all. So yeah, there was this one individual that had 3% chance of living. And he's a, finance guy, and he's like, he did the numbers. He's like, why can't I be one of the 3%? Why do I have to be the other 97% that don't, survive this, this cancer? There was another person who actually just changed her whole dietary structure. And for her, within a few months, she was able to come back to, to norm. So those things happen. I don't know if a lot of it, because I asked some very probing questions in the interview. Like I asked a question about if your cancer had a message, what would it say? And a few people stopped and said, I never thought of that. And because you don't think of it, right? You think of something like Pac-Man trying to eat you, but you're not thinking of it. Well, why is Pac-Man doing what Pac-Man's doing?
Yeah.
Like, why?
Right.
And what is underlying in that? So I think really the messages or the interviews that I did with the book and what the book expresses is really about, if I can break it down, it would just be an action. Everyone in that was an action in some way, shape, or form. They just didn't just sit there with the diagnosis and say, that's it. They didn't throw in the towel. And I'm saying this with a very sensitive hand because I literally just lost a good friend of mine, lost her mom like 3 days ago from cancer.
Wow.
So, and I've lost many people to cancer. But I think the key here is if every last iota of beingness that you have, you need to not fight cancer always, but you need to understand cancer and why it's coming into your life, in what area of your life, where is the cancer located in your body? You know, what is the cancer's weaknesses? You know, going back to what I initially stated. And for your soul's journey, if you believe in something larger than yourself, you know, if your belief system, you know, attributes to that, what is this journey? What is this particular spot on that journey trying to make you see, or make you acknowledge, or make you actually overcome? Because as you and I believe that we've lived maybe other lifetimes, what is this particular lifetime in this particular time in space and time showing you that you need to overcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing to say to any sort of illness that we're dealing with. Like, you know, what is it that you're trying to show me? What is the message, so that I can get the message and hang up the phone of this disease, you know, so I can get the message, understand, and grow and integrate from it. You know, that approach and perspective, viewing it as an ally, you know, although it's kind of like a rose with a thorn, right? Doesn't mean it doesn't sting or hurt, but, you know, same thing with, you know, lots of growth in our lives. You know, the gym is going to sting or hurt, as an example. And so, you know, what is the message that you're wanting to bring, and then being open to receiving that, I think is very, very powerful way to approach it, as opposed to this thing is the enemy and I need to fight it.
And it's also a level of acceptance. Like I had to get a bone marrow aspiration, and the doctors were just amazed because they said people have kicked, screamed, cursed, and like you were just silent. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like that's not my nature. I'm not like that. This is the situation. You told me what I have. I definitely feel sick. I definitely have something attached to me. I'm bedridden for a week. So obviously I know I'm sick. It's not like I'm imagining it. And so I think that's where, you know, in my book, I mentioned, you know, in coaching, there's something called the trans-theoretical model of change, called the stages of change. And it really posits that people are not resistant to change. They just don't know how to. They don't know the steps needed to change. So that goes from pre-contemplation, thinking about it, to actually being action about it, doing the steps necessary. And people need that handholding. That's where coaching is so magical, because you can sort of allow your client to feel that they can go through that, you know, that process. And I put that in that book purposely in my intro, because I wanted people to understand that cancer is not just something. And if you believe that it's just something like a blip and you can go on, then that's great. But I believe, after interviewing over 200 cancer survivors and doing the research on cancer myself and being certified, you know, in a specific cancer oncology practice, I believe that you need to actually evolve from this, that it's actually there to, as a good friend once said, polish the facets of your character, to show you what you're really made of, to show you what you really want to create, to show you what you can do to lighten the load of your life. Because, you know, a large portion of individuals that I mentioned with cancer, including my own, where it just randomly happened, if you was to trace back and pinpoint, there are some warning signs that happened to them and for them, that they just to some degree ignored or just didn't think much of.
Yeah. I think that's often the case with the body. It will have warning shots, and we're just so, you know, sort of disconnected a lot of times from our bodies. And I would imagine this experience also makes you feel more connected to your body in a certain way. I mean, you know, are so, now it's such a close, so much attention going on it, whereas before probably not, would be my guess.
You're 100% correct. I actually did not live in my body for many years. Cancer forced me to get vulnerable with my body. Cancer forced me to be living in the physical. I was like a very emotional, spiritual kind of type of guy, you know, and I kind of not discounted the physical body, but I didn't, I exercised and I ate right, but I just wasn't really always connected with it. And now I'm super, super connected with it in the sense of always trying to understand what's happening, because as much as I do this work with clients, I also do it on myself. I'm someone who believes that I practice what I preach.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear from you, switch gears maybe a little bit here. As the listeners know, I love to hear inspiring stories of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal stories. And I'm curious if you have anything like that, that you would care to share to bring the magic.
So I have a few. So let me trace back early, and then let me give you a couple of examples.
I'd love a couple. Yeah.
Okay. So one of them is, so I grew up in a little town in Westchester, not the town I live in currently. If you ever saw the show, The Facts of Life, back in the 90s and 80s, I grew up in a little town called Peekskill. I grew up in Peekskill. And so I was kind of sheltered, lived, two other sisters growing up, mother and father, and, just a middle class type of environment. And then went to school in the big city. I went to school literally in Manhattan in a 20-story building. And when I applied, there was two schools. One was upstate New York and one was that. And so when I applied, I put the standard thing, I wrote my essay, and I was in a 6-person suite, and 4 of them were openly gay. At the time, I was not a gay man. I didn't identify. I didn't even understand what that even actually honestly meant. And I know that sounds really weird, but we're talking about the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And then what ended up happening is, and they were all different expressions and variations. One of them liked to dress and drag. One of them had a lisp, all the stereotypical sort of ideologies. And I ended up sort of, because of that situation, I ended up being comfortable with myself to come out myself a year later.
Wow.
And if I didn't have that, I don't think I would have. And I remember getting a lot of people saying, well, why are you hanging out with those individuals? They're your roommates, but you're straight, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. So that was very eye-opening to me, because, and then also 2 years later, the other guy came out as well. So
wow, what a trip.
Yeah. Very, very strange. And he was like into Bette Midler and all like the stereotypical stuff. So people kind of thought that he was as well.
Yeah.
But like, I'm thinking back, did I write anything in my essay? Did I write anything in my application? I wrote nothing that would be considered stereotypical, right? Nothing at all. And so it happened. So that's number one. I know that's a strange one, but
that's a really cool. It's like the whole, water seeks its own level. And it's like, okay, here's the perfect container for Salvio to feel comfortable. It's like, we're going to make this like such the norm. And I think that's a really fascinating.
And if you really think about it, like, and there was, the school I went to was a liberal arts school, but it, like, no one in that room was like a theater mate, like they were all different, like I was IT. So that was really strange. The other one was actually the night before 9/11. I was coming from the city, visiting some friends, and I turned to the exit where my home is, and I hit a deer. And the front of the
on September 10th, 2000.
Yeah,
right?
It was around 1:30 in the morning on September 11th. So it was.
Oh, wow.
Hours.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it hit a deer, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So at that time I was living with my parents. I just graduated college. And so I woke up the next morning. I'm like, oh man, they're going to give me shit, because it's my dad's car. It's not even my own car. Yeah. And they're like, did you see? I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry. They're like, no, did you see what's happening here? And I'm like, what? And then they're like, and I'm like, oh my God, of course, right? The whole world was reeling because of 9/11. And then I found out like 7-8 hours later, a good friend of mine named Eric was on the 104th floor. He ended up passing away.
Wow.
And I say this because Eric would really help me. He got my first job out of college. Like, there was something about him just wanting to help me. He literally went out of his way. And he actually said to me at one point, he's like, listen, I know you're in IT. I know you like to do creative things, but why don't you work here in Wall Street? I can get you a job with my firm. You could make like $85,000 a year. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Some kid right out of college in the 90s, like making that much. And I was like, Eric, I can't wear a suit. I'm like, I'm not that guy. I just can't do it. And I think back, because if I was, I probably would have died that day.
Right. You'd have been there with him, huh?
I would have totally been there with him. So anyway, so that was another one.
What do you think is for you, obviously hitting a deer hours before you know, everything went down. I mean, do you have any sort of interpretation of why that took place then?
Yeah, you know, I just think, well, fortunately, I wasn't physically hurt. So the only thing happened was the car was hurt. I think maybe it was a warning to some degree, or maybe it was more about paying attention, or maybe it was to some degree. I don't really know, because that's a very strange thing to hit a deer.
Yeah.
And it literally was the exit. So I wasn't going that fast, right? You know, everyone slows down when they hit an exit. So I think it was really about maybe understanding death in general. Like, you know, it's an animal, and, you know, who died, and now there's hundreds of people that passed away. And so maybe it was a part of that, but that also springboarded me to understanding more about spirituality. So I, you know, ended up, you know, attending a couple of, you know, groups, and I got more involved in that, you know, realm as well. So I think it helped me understand that as well. It was another pivotal moment about death that made me understand it deeper.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing and very inspiring. I know there will be listeners that would love to kind of connect with you, follow your work. What is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can go to my website. It's thehumanresolve.com. My book website, which has a book trailer, is isurvivedcancer.co. You can find me on socials at The Human Resolve, LinkedIn, Clemente, and I will soon be on TikTok because everyone's like, you got to be on TikTok. So I'm going to soon be on that.
Cool.
As well.
Excellent. Well, I do have one final question I'd like to ask you here, and it is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Salvio Clemente?
The meaning of life is about understanding self. It's understanding the true nature of who you are from a very embodied perspective, head, heart, gut, mental, emotional, spiritual, vibrational, soul. It's about overcoming lessons learned from, if you believe like I do, in previous lifetimes. It's also about becoming greater expression of the human experience. And it's really about love and acceptance and understanding.
Well said, my friend. Thank you for your inspiring journey, and thank all of you for tuning in your beautiful brain waves, heart waves, following your gut here. Three brains. And until next time, journey well. Love you so much.
Yes. And thanks, everyone. You can always go to my website and sign up for my newsletter that's there, or my podcast, The Human Resolve. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Bye for now. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.